Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a highly structured, pretty provocative framework detailed by financial analyst Simon Dixon. Look, if you're a student of modern economic history, understanding how global power actually flows is absolutely crucial. We're going to examine a theory of how transnational power structures, not just your individual sovereign governments, effectively run global empires, extract resources, and shift wealth around the world. Here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering today. 1. The three industrial complexes. 2. The debt-based Ponzi scheme. 3. Subordinating sovereign nations. 4. Historical empire shifts. And finally, 5. The multipolar transition. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The three industrial complexes. We're going to start by mapping out the actual machine. These are the overarching power structures that sit way above traditional governments. At the absolute top of the food chain sits the financial industrial complex, or the FIC. Now, we're not just talking about one big bank here. It's a massive transnational network of asset managers, central banks, and financial institutions. They hold the ultimate power simply by dictating who gets access to capital. Because every public entity on Earth needs funding, the FIC controls fiat currency creation and directs global capital flows. This effectively subordinates governments to their specific agendas. Subordinate to finance is the military-industrial complex. This is a highly structured network of defense contractors, and remember, they have fiduciary duties to their shareholders. To hit those consistent quarterly earnings, this complex literally requires perpetual conflict. According to the source material, the MIC's entire business model is fundamentally about destabilizing regions to capture strategic resources, secure massive lucrative rebuilding contracts, and continually generate revenue. Finally, wrapping it all together, we have the technological industrial complex, or TIC. These are the giant tech conglomerates, providing the data centers, the algorithms, and the surveillance grids that the other two complexes desperately need. Interestingly, much of this tech is initially funded by military or intelligence budgets. Think of agencies like DARPA. And then it gets transferred over to private companies to manage the public narrative and engineer control. So, what actually powers these three behemoths? Section 2, the debt-based Ponzi scheme. To understand the fuel, we have to look at central banking and the architecture of our modern economy. The core thesis here is fascinating. The central banking system operates exactly like a forced game of Monopoly. The rules of the game are systematically designed to concentrate wealth upwards over time, forcing constant growth and asset extraction just to keep the whole game going. Let's break down the math here, because it's kind of wild. First, a private bank issues a loan, creating credit out of thin air as new money. But here's the massive catch. While the principal amount is created, the money needed to pay the interest is never created. So, mathematically speaking, there is literally never enough money in the system to pay back the principal plus the interest. This forces a perpetual cycle where debt just has to constantly roll over, demanding infinite growth and ensuring that wealth flows right back to the creators of the currency. Now, a crucial point for any history student is observing the transition we've made. The American empire was initially built on this incredible post-WW2 manufacturing dominance. We're talking about actually building physical technology, infrastructure, and running a massive export economy. But over the decades, that has morphed into modern financialization. Today, it's basically a pure debt-based extraction economy managed by transnational capital. It's characterized by huge bailouts and extreme wealth concentration where the host economy is slowly, systematically hollowed out. Section 3. Subordinating sovereign nations. With the machine and the fuel defined, how do these complexes actually pull the strings on the ground? Well, through this analytical lens, politicians, they're often merely actors providing acceptable narratives for the public, while real power exerts its influence using a very precise blueprint. We're talking about using IMF debt traps to leverage developing nations, lobbyist auctions to basically buy domestic lawmakers, intelligence-backed regime changes for states that won't cooperate, and even literal currency destruction to collapse savings and trigger civil unrest. Notice how these tactics are uniformly applied across vastly different nations, all to achieve the exact same goal: capital control. In places like Iran, the tactic is destroying the currency to create crippling inflation and uprisings. In Egypt, historically, it was leveraging IMF debt to force compliance and strip away national resources. And right here at home in the US, the primary tactic is a highly sophisticated political lobbying system where policy is effectively auctioned off to the highest corporate interests. But here's the thing. This system can't stay in one place forever. Section 4. the shift of global empires. Let's track the historical trajectory of how these empires rise, extract, and ultimately migrate. Historically speaking, the monopoly board gets reset. This model shows us that the center of transnational power has deliberately migrated over the centuries. It moved from the Dutch Empire in the 17th century to the British Empire in the 19th century over to the American Empire in the 20th century. And now, the entire architecture is migrating once again, moving toward a new multipolar horizon. According to the framework, these empires don't just quietly fade away into the night. They actually require a defining theatrical Suez Canal moment. Just like the 1956 crisis proved the British could no longer enforce their will globally, which signaled the end of their era, similar geopolitical pressure points today are being used to trigger the migration of transnational wealth into a brand new system. Which brings us to a massive, pivotal question in our explainer today. If the current debt-based system has extracted maximum wealth from Western populations, literally to the point where growth is stagnating and the host is tapped out, where does transnational capital go next to survive and find new growth? Where does it go? Section 5, the multipolar world transition. This is the highly contested shift we are living through right now. The global landscape is literally fracturing right in front of us into powerful new blocks. We're seeing Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds in the GCC, massive coalitions in Asia, and of course the BRICS nations, led by China, all pushing back hard against unilateral Western financial control. Transnational capital is looking at this and recognizing that the future of consumer growth and wealth generation lies in these emerging regions. A huge player in this shift is China. The theory posits that China avoided being subordinated by basically building a walled garden. Through incredibly strict capital controls and an insulated corporate structure, they essentially forced the financial industrial complex to negotiate with them rather than conquer them. And to secure global resources, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, creating wealth-building partnerships all over the map. And this is a complete game changer for the Global South. The traditional IMF model was all about extracting resources, forcing debt, and installing compliant dictators. But this new alternative, it's about building local infrastructure, actually employing local populations, and fostering wealthy consumers who can buy manufactured goods. Not surprisingly, the Global South is increasingly choosing this infrastructure-driven growth over that old model of extractive debt. So where does this leave you? What is the actual takeaway for the individual watching these massive tectonic plates shift? The source material suggests that surviving this transition requires stepping completely outside the debt loop. We're talking about true sovereignty here, reducing your debt, finding jurisdictional arbitrage, participating in decentralized communities, and crucially, holding your wealth in self-custodied assets that these complexes can't just inflate away or seize. I'll leave you with this one final thought to ponder. As the global monopoly board resets and power visibly shifts from the West into a multipolar world, how will you protect your own independence? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the anatomy of global power. See you in the next explainer.